I'm Darren Pritchett, joined by Mike Singer, the Notre Dame football recruiting insider, Blue and Gold Illustrated, blueandgold.com. Besides being on the radio, we're also recording this for playback on Blue and Gold Illustrated's YouTube channel. So, Mike, let's dig into some recruiting conversation. Well, you teased us last week that there were 5 possible commitments for the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman and his staff, they go 5 for 5. The nice thing, Mike, there wasn't a lot of drama last week. Everything sort of fell into place. Maybe just give us your thumbnail sketch, 5 commitments from the Fighting Irish. Put it into perspective what the Irish accomplished last week.
I will add, it ended up being 5 for 6. There's a athlete recruit, Micah Tees out of Oklahoma, who ended up announcing pretty, like, I think after my last segment on your show, that he was going to be committing on 4th of July, and he picked Arkansas. So I will categorize that as a recruiting loss for Notre Dame. But in terms of the 5 that we knew of when we had been talking about, Cam Williams, Micah Bell, Rico Flores, Christian Gray, Charles Jagasaw, those 5, Notre Dame did land all 5 of them. And really nice recruiting wins for Notre Dame. Positions of need, you got a on-3 5-star in Charles Jagasaw. You get a top flight receiver with offers from Ohio State and Bama and USC and all these schools, and you get your first 2 cornerback commitments ranked 118 nationally and 78th nationally. 2 top 11 cornerback recruits in the country. Things are going pretty well on the recruiting front for Notre Dame right now.
I want to ask you about Rico Flores Jr. You have told us a lot about him over a good amount of time on the program. And this is a young man who had the great choices, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Georgia. And he is verbally committed to the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. When you think about how good he is, and when you also factor in the need in this class for Notre Dame, how much of a home run is this?
The thing I like most about him, on top of those 2 things, is that he's a pretty ready-made receiver. So he doesn't have 4.3, 4.4 speed. I don't know his 40 time. He might be like a 4.6 guy or something. He's not a burner, but he's so technically advanced as a route runner, using his hands. His football IQ comes from a fantastic program in Northern California at Folsom. Plays great competition up there. He does everything right. He's got good size, about 6'1", 190, 195. Just a player who can come in and help right away for Notre Dame. And, he's someone who, if Notre Dame needs him to, I could see him contributing as a true freshman. So just the overall skill, the rankings, the offer list, the position of need, obviously receiver being so crucial for Notre Dame in this 2023 class, it's a monster get for the Irish.
Now, Mike, I have an old friend who was a recruiting coordinator, and he always told me, try to combine classes at a position to really give you an idea where the program stands. So as we look at the 23 class of wide receivers, if you want to go back to the 22 class for a second and kind of combine the 2, we knew going into 22 that they were going to have to hit on the next couple of classes in order to get back the depth and quality. Didn't work out in 22, but is 23 helping to close the gap that was lost maybe the previous year?
Oh, that's a tough question. It kind of will depend on how good, like CJ Williams and Amorion Walker, who they had committed but lost late. I actually think Williams is fairly comparable with Rico Flores, both these big-bodied outside receivers, very good technical players. So it'll kind of depend on that. But yeah, Tobias Merriweather, who got to Notre Dame a few weeks ago, he's a speedy, playmaking, high-ceiling outside receiver. Braylon James, another guy, I believe is 6'3", 200-poundish guy, another outside guy. Flores, I think, can play in the slot. He can put him outside. They're getting versatile receivers with a good combination of ceiling and floor. Again, you only signed 1 receiver in the 22 cycle, which was a flop. But the one you got in Merriweather was fantastic. You get Braylon James, you get Rico Flores, and Darren, I think that kind of moves us into our next discussion is who could join Flores and James.
So let's get to that. Let's talk about what might be coming down the line next for the Fighting Irish. And is there anybody close at wide receiver that might enhance that particular position?
Yeah, there's two players I'm keeping a close eye on. You got Ronan Hannafin up from Massachusetts. So you got, Texas, Northern California, you got Massachusetts, and the next guy we'll talk about is another Texas guy. So I mean, Notre Dame's recruit all over the place. Hannafin's really interesting because Notre Dame's just been recruiting him as an athlete. You see, for folks watching on YouTube, On3 has him listed as an athlete, 4-star player. But, I thought for a while it was looking like he was going to be like a safety. Maybe he's a rover. If he gets bigger, he's just such a good athlete. But he seems to prefer receiver. And, he's just such a good player that Notre Dame would love to take him at wide receiver. So I like Notre Dame to land Hannafin. I put in a prediction several months ago for him to land with the Irish. Still feeling pretty good about it. He officially visited Boston College, Alabama, and I believe Clemson in June, as well as Notre Dame. So some heavy hitters there with 2 perennial national championship contenders. But I do like Notre Dame to land Hannafin. And then the next guy would be Jaden Greathouse, who's from the Austin, Texas area, as well as Braylon James, who's committed. They're good friends. I think Greathouse and Hannafin, they don't have like set decision dates. They haven't put out there like, hey, I'm committing soon, but just kind of an inkling that those two guys seem to be done with the recruiting process, going into decision mode. Both would be outstanding gets for Notre Dame if they sign a 4-man receiver class of Ronan Hannafin, Jaden Greathouse, Rico Flores, and Braylon James. I mean, I'll let the fans tell me if that's best receiver class since when. I'll let the fans tell me that, but be pretty darn good. And if that's 4, that's hitting a really good number. I know Notre Dame fans really wanted 4 or 5 receivers in this class. So if they get a minimum of 4, that'd be awesome.
Are you ready for my one question I always ask you that's off the wall?
I'm ready for it, Darren. Bring it on.
All right. Just with Greathouse being from Texas and Texas recruiting him, Manning picking Texas, has that affected Notre Dame football recruiting at all? Because they had a great run of recruits right after Manning picked Texas. Has that affected anyone Notre Dame was interested in off the top of your head?
Yeah, so you'd have to look at offensive skill players for that, and running back, no, tight end, no, offensive line, no. We would have to see what happens at receiver. Could Arch sway Greathouse or James, who again are Austin kids? Could that sway them towards Texas? We'll just have to see. But I do believe Texas went on a little recruiting run there after Arch committed, and I believe they got some receiver commitments. So I'm not sure where their receiver board stands, but Greathouse and James, as well as Flores, all guys that, if Notre Dame gets all of them, of course, they already have Flores and James. Like, if they get Greathouse, you got to stay on them. You got to stay on Flores. You got to stay on James. Make sure that these guys, aren't having second thoughts and avoid a disaster like Notre Dame had last cycle.